All right, so it's just after 3 in the morning on July 3rd, 1996. Dana Rawlings is behind the wheel, driving with a couple of his friends. He'd just wrapped up a DJ set at a local club, dropped some people off, and honestly, he was just ready to call it a night. He's heading down this street, Ferry Reach Road. It's pretty poorly lit, and suddenly his headlights just land on something up ahead. His first thought, probably roadkill. But for whatever reason, something made Dana slow down to get a better look. And he did. And what he saw there on the road, Christ, it was something that would stick with him for the rest of his life. It wasn't an animal out there. It was a person fighting to stay alive. He gets closer and sees it's a young girl, curled into a ball on the pavement. She was trying so hard to say something, but nothing was coming out. She was just crying, tears all over her face, and the way she looked up at Dana was this silent, desperate plea for help. Goddamn, his friends they bolted, running to find the nearest payphone. You have to remember, this was 1996. Not everybody was walking around with a cell phone, so Dana stayed right there with her. He tried to keep her calm, telling her that it was going to be all right, She just kept sobbing, and he was just doing his best to let her know that help was on its way, that she just had to hang on. Before long, he could hear sirens approaching in the distance, but he could also feel that her body was growing cold, and in just a matter of minutes, Dana knew she was gone. What he didn't know was her name was Rebecca Middleton. He didn't know she was only 17 years old when her life was stolen from her, and he had no idea she was just in Bermuda on vacation. Rebecca Middleton was from Belleville, Ontario, where she lived with her parents, Cindy and Dave Middleton, and her two older brothers, Matthew and Mark. She was a student at Centennial Secondary School in town, and people described her as a good student. The thing about Rebecca was, she really loved to have a good time and was a super lighthearted person. But she was also known for being very cautious. And even though she was really outgoing, her dad Dave always said she was street smart, that he never really had to worry about her getting herself into trouble. She had a job at a gas station nearby, and everyone figured it was the perfect kind of job for her back then. She'd always greet people with this big smile and was just helpful in general. Rebecca also had a really big circle of friends. She was always having sleepovers at their houses, and she was close with her family too, whether they were just watching movies or going out for a meal. She was also completely an outdoorsy type of person. She'd much rather be outside water skiing, sailing, or camping than stuck at home. Seriously, she was adventurous. Always loved experiencing new things. Now, her parents had divorced when she was about 13, but Rebecca still had a fantastic, healthy relationship with both of them. She saw them frequently, and she got along with her step-siblings pretty well, too. She also had a best friend named Jasmine Meads, who she'd known since she was 6. And let me tell you, those two were inseparable from the moment they met. They did everything together. They were honestly more like sisters than just friends. So, keeping that in mind, after Rebecca finished the 11th grade, her parents gave her this amazing surprise gift. But it wasn't some ordinary present. It was a 6-week vacation to Bermuda with her best friend, Jasmine. For Rebecca, this was literally the perfect gift. As this fun-loving, adventurous person, she just could not wait to go. And getting to go with her best friend, she must have thought she was about to have the greatest 6 weeks of her entire life. Bermuda is located about 640 miles off the coast of North Carolina, so it's a good ways from the mainland United States. For a girl from Ontario, it probably felt like the other side of the world. It's a place that's known for its pink sand beaches, its tropical climate. It's technically an archipelago, which is a chain of 181 separate islands. So this was where Rebecca was set to spend a month and a half with her best friend, and they weren't going to be there all by themselves. As it turned out, Jasmine's father, Rick, lived in Bermuda with Jasmine's stepmom, and Jasmine would visit them there often. This meant they'd have adult supervision, which was supposed to keep them safe while they explored the beaches, took pictures, and just had an incredible time. So it wasn't like Rebecca's parents were just sending her into a totally unknown situation. But here's the thing. As excited as Rebecca was for this trip, she had no way of knowing that this incredible vacation would be her last. So, 16-year-old Rebecca and Jasmine packed everything up, got on a plane, and headed out for their 6-week Bermuda trip. They took a ton of photos. On the flight over, out on the beaches, in front of all those colorful houses. And for the first 2 weeks, their trip was just absolutely exhilarating. But even with all the fun they were having, Jasmine's dad, Rick, had established some clear rules to make sure they stayed safe. For one, the girls had a strict curfew, and they were required to call Rick so he could pick them up and bring them home. He was dead set against them riding bikes or mopeds. He just felt they were too dangerous, that they could get into an accident and get hurt. So, Rick was letting the girls have fun, but he was also being careful, like any good parent would. June 27th rolled around, and Rebecca turned 17, saying goodbye to being 16. And just like that, June was over, and it was July. And on July 2nd, 1996, the girls had plans to meet up with a group of boys at a pub called the White Horse Tavern. Rick had actually dropped the girls off, and he knew they were going to be with the boys, so it's not like Rebecca and Jasmine were sneaking off or anything. The boys were from the UK, and they were just in Bermuda for summer vacation. They were all close in age, and they became friends pretty quickly. Now, the girls had a 1 a.m. curfew, and a little before midnight, the party moved over to one of the boys' houses. But what Rebecca and Jasmine didn't realize was just how late it had gotten. It was past 1 a.m, and naturally, the girls were scared to get in trouble with Rick. They didn't want to call him because they knew he'd give them the whole lecture about curfews and not paying attention to the time, so they figured their best bet was just to call a cab. But even that went nowhere. They tried calling a cab company, and after more than an hour had passed, there was still no sign of it, and it was pouring rain. The girls were outside the boys' house, calling this cab service over and over, but it just didn't show up. As Rebecca and Jasmine were waiting there on the sidewalk, around 3 a.m., a motorcycle passed them. The driver, a guy named Dean, stopped and started a casual conversation with the two girls. Now, Dean was harmless, and he even offered to give them a ride. But at that same moment, another motorcycle stopped in front of them, and this time, there were 2 men getting off of it. They all started chatting, and the driver of the second motorcycle seemed oddly interested in Rebecca. Jasmine saw the guy playing with Rebecca's necklace, which was a gift from Jasmine, and this was right when the 2 guys offered to give both of the girls a ride. Rebecca and Jasmine didn't just hop on the back immediately, though. They were apprehensive. I mean, they knew it wasn't safe to take a ride from people they'd just met, but after a lot of convincing and realizing they didn't have much of another choice to get home, the girls agreed. Jasmine got on the back with Dean, and Rebecca went with the other 2 men, and they started driving. At some point, Jasmine pleaded with Dean to slow down because she was getting scared, and he did. But the other 2 drivers just sped up, took a turn down a different road, and within seconds, Jasmine and Dean lost sight of their motorcycle and lost sight of Rebecca. A little while later, Jasmine arrived home, and she was expecting Rebecca to already be there too, but she wasn't. She searched everywhere and even waited for a couple of minutes before her nerves and anxiety got the best of her, and she felt she had no other option but to wake her dad up and tell him that Rebecca hadn't made it home. Rick got up immediately, and the 2 of them got into the car and just drove from street to street, calling Rebecca's name, hoping that she'd be somewhere. But sadly, she wasn't. They also passed by an ambulance, and something in Jasmine's gut told her that this was not a good sign. But they still didn't stop their search for Rebecca. Little did Jasmine know, her intuition was right. Jasmine and Rick searched all night for Rebecca, but with no luck. So Rick immediately called the investigators to report 17-year-old Rebecca Middleton missing. But the detectives wouldn't file a missing persons report, because it hadn't been over 24 hours since Rebecca had disappeared. It's that familiar, frustrating story. Everybody knows the whole 24-hour thing isn't a real law, but if the officers refuse to take a report, what can you really do? By the time you get lawyers and higher-ups involved, it's likely already been 24 hours anyway. But before Rick could even object to what the detectives were telling him, he was cut off and placed on hold. After a minute or so that felt like forever, the investigators told Rick that they needed to go to Ferry Reach Road to find Rebecca. Now, this detail feels a bit weird. It just seems odd that police would tell the victim's friends where they were going to be investigating. But maybe there's more to the story that wasn't made public. We really don't know. But without hesitation, Rick and Jasmine made their way to their destination, and Jasmine was a complete wreck. She was asking her dad a million questions a minute, and as they reached the area, things weren't looking good. There were police officers, yellow tape, red and blue lights everywhere. Rick ordered Jasmine to stay in the car, and as he made his way towards the police officers, well, Rick must have been filled with a terrible sense of dread. There was no sign of Rebecca. There was only a large black zipper bag on the ground. It was a body bag. When Rick finally got to the scene, the investigators asked if he might be able to identify the body of a young girl that they had just found. Rick agreed, but as soon as they approached the bag, he fell to his knees. He was looking straight at a lifeless and beaten Rebecca. Jesus Christ. Rick, who was supposed to keep Rebecca and Jasmine safe, didn't know how he was going to tell Rebecca's parents this tragic, devastating news. He was just broken, overcome with guilt and traumatized. In his mind, it was his job to keep Rebecca safe. And he had failed. Rebecca's parents were experiencing their worst nightmare come to life. Every parent is a bit iffy about letting their teenage child go on a trip. But to hear that their daughter's life was taken so brutally and senselessly on a trip that was supposed to be a birthday present from them, that's the kind of hurt that you can't live down. Rebecca's parents were blindsided, shocked, and confused all at once. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. But when reality settled in, that's when they knew their world would never be the same. How did a fun night out take such a horrifying turn? Who had done this to Rebecca? And more importantly, who found Rebecca? Well, it was another stranger. That local DJ, Dana Rollins, was driving down Ferry Reach Road at around 3:30 in the morning, and something on the side of the road made him slam on the brakes. When he got closer, it was the young girl. She was still alive, but badly injured. And when I say badly injured, I mean it. There were injuries all over her face and neck, and she was struggling to breathe. What was done to this girl? It was beyond words. Dana remembered the look on the young girl's face. It was just bewildered with pain and horror. She couldn't speak, but Dana knew that she needed help. So he put pressure on her wounds while his friends called for emergency services. He tried to soothe the young girl and told her to stay with him, that help was on the way. But sadly, she couldn't be saved. And Dana saw the life leave her eyes. There was no pulse. The young girl had died from her wounds. And that's when the detectives and emergency services finally showed up. And remember that ambulance that passed Rick and Jasmine? Well, it was headed straight for Rebecca at that time. The investigators questioned Jasmine to get the timeline of what happened the night Rebecca went missing. She told them everything about getting a ride from two strangers on a motorcycle and how they got separated. So right away, the investigators knew that those two mysterious men were their prime suspects. And luckily, the solo motorcycle rider who gave Jasmine a ride home, Dean, was able to identify the two men who'd left with Rebecca. They were 21-year-old Kirk Mundy and 17-year-old Justice Smith. Another man also came forward and confirmed that he saw two men covered in blood in the same area where Rebecca's body was later found. This man was also able to recognize the two men as Kirk and Justice, so this seems like a pretty straightforward case, right? You've got multiple witnesses. The suspects have been identified. It seems like Rebecca could get justice. Well, sadly, the Bermuda Police Department would completely mess up the investigation and everything that came after. And it's really a perfect example of just one wrong decision after another. Rebecca's body was taken for an autopsy, and the results were absolutely horrific. She had over 30 wounds on her body, and worse, she had been sexually assaulted. To even think about what Rebecca must have gone through in her final moments. God, it's just devastating. The DNA found on Rebecca's body was sent off for testing. But this is when the Bermuda Police Department made a huge mistake. Now don't ask me why, but the police were somehow certain that Justice was the one who had assaulted Rebecca. The investigators decided that Justice was the main aggressor, and that Kirk was just his accomplice. How they came to that conclusion, I seriously don't know. There was absolutely no evidence to prove this. But for reasons that are still not clear, the police were just jumping to conclusions. So, instead of waiting for the DNA results to come back, which would 100% prove who assaulted Rebecca, the police offered Kirk a plea deal. They wanted Kirk to plead guilty to being an accessory after the fact and to testify against Justice at the trial. Kirk accepted the deal, which meant he was only sentenced to 5 years in prison. And if you think that's bad, just wait, because it gets worse. The DNA results eventually came back, and the DNA found on Rebecca's body belonged to Kirk. So he was almost certainly the one who assaulted Rebecca, not Justice, Kirk. But the problem is, the police had already signed the plea deal. The trial was over, so it didn't matter what Kirk had done. He couldn't be resentenced. And to make things even worse, because the DNA belonged to Kirk, Justice, the one they thought was the accomplice, was just let go. He was free to walk away without any punishment at all. What the hell? The local community was, naturally, furious. The investigators were messing this up step after step, and the public was just seething. They didn't want two violent men getting off with light sentences for brutally killing a young, defenseless girl. Locals put pressure on the police to charge them both with murder. But because of double jeopardy laws, which basically mean a person can't be tried for the same crime twice, Kirk walked away with his 5-year sentence, and he couldn't be charged again. And they couldn't even charge Justice with anything, because all the evidence against him was circumstantial. Even though there was evidence that both of them were involved in Rebecca's horrible attack and death, there was just no hard physical evidence, like Justice's DNA, to back it up. To make matters even worse, the prosecutors never even used Kirk as a witness in Justice's trial like they had originally planned. The judge felt he wasn't a reliable witness. So the whole plea deal was for nothing. This whole thing. It's just unbelievable. How one police department could make so many incredible mistakes is so far beyond anything I can comprehend. So, what happened at the end of the trial? Well, the defense argued that the case was weak and that all the evidence was circumstantial. And they successfully managed to convince the jury to just drop the charges against Justice. And that's when he walked away, a free man. The Middleton family was devastated by the jury's decision. The justice system had just let one of two murderers walk free without any consequences. I mean, I don't even know if you could really count the 5 years Kirk received as a consequence either. But the Middleton family didn't give up. They tried so hard to push for another trial. They made countless appeals, and they went as far as trying for charges of aggravated assault, sexual assault, and kidnapping. They even reached out to Cherie Booth, one of Great Britain's most notable human rights lawyers. But sadly, nothing came of it. The Bermuda investigators literally took a case that should have been straightforward and completely botched it because of their own incompetence. Then they managed to look people in the eye and say they'd solved the murder in record time. This was all to keep the police department's name looking good. Well, so much for protecting their image. Because everyone was appalled and disgusted by the police's actions from beginning to end. But the story still isn't over, and it gets worse. Rebecca's mom, Cindy, applied for a payout of $100,000 from the Bermuda police for putting them through the worst possible trauma with their so-called investigation. But how much money did the Middleton family receive in the end? A staggering, mind-blowing $2,840. If you're thinking I missed a 0 or 2, I didn't. That is literally how much the police department paid the Middleton family. Their daughter's life and their family's grief was worth less than $3,000. As a way to protect their reputation, the Bermuda Police Department worked on digging up more evidence against Kirk Mundy and Justice Smith. And it turns out that Kirk was actually out on bail for armed robbery when he and Justice crossed paths with Rebecca, so these men, they were proven to be violent. They had a history with the law before the horrific and fatal attack on Rebecca. Now, in the end, Kirk was sentenced to an additional 15 years in prison for that robbery charge. But that's almost meaningless at this point. 5 years for taking advantage of and murdering a 17-year-old girl and 15 for robbery? I mean, what the hell? And as of now, Kirk Mundy is out of prison. He was just deported back to Jamaica, where he's originally from, so a murderer. A murderer is just out there on the streets of Jamaica. I don't even want to think about what he might be doing over there. But what about the other guy? Justice. Well, he wasn't exactly an innocent accomplice or a bystander either. Because in 2003, it was reported that Justice was arrested for attacking a woman with a weapon outside a club. He was sentenced to 18 months in prison. That's a year and a half for attacking a woman, which is just horrific. And I really hope that poor woman is healing from all that trauma. But what did he get in Rebecca's case? 0 years. Nothing. This case. Honestly, it'll just break your heart and spike your blood pressure at the same time. How can investigators botch a homicide investigation this badly? Look, I get it. Bermuda has a pretty low crime rate. Maybe the police don't really know what they're doing when a terrible crime like this happens. But are you telling me that there aren't any competent, experienced police officers in that department who can at least follow general protocol, or at the very least, understand the law before acting on things? Dave and Cindy. They have to live without their daughter for the rest of their lives. Rick has to live with the guilt and just a terrible onslaught of emotions because even to this day, he can't remember this brutal, horrific event without feeling like he's just going to collapse. Jasmine lost her best friend, someone who was like a sister to her. She struggled severely with depression, survivor's guilt, regular guilt. Just about every emotion you could possibly imagine. As for the kind stranger Dana, who was with Rebecca during her final moments, he can never erase that image of Rebecca lying cold and helpless and exposed on the road from his mind. Dana, just like the rest of Rebecca's loved ones, can never forget her. He said in a documentary that he named his own daughter Rebecca, to do some small part in keeping her legacy alive. He's overcome with this guilt that he couldn't save her, but he promises he'll remember her story for the rest of his life and make sure that not for one single day will Rebecca be forgotten. Rebecca was known to leave an impact on pretty much everyone she met, and even after her death, her impact lives on. Rebecca's funeral was held 6 days after she passed away, and aside from her friends, family, and loved ones, countless strangers showed up to the funeral, just standing by the grieving family and offering their support, their love, and a shoulder to lean on. It was so incredibly powerful. The warmth that the community showed to the Middletons. Literal strangers all coming together just to let the Middletons know they weren't alone. We're all angry. We're all bitter. We're all furious that these insignificant worms, they managed to steal the light from someone else's life, and they didn't even face the proper punishment. Look, when a case like this happens, it's just a tragic reminder that even when you do everything right, when you're cautious and careful and smart, you can still become a victim. It's an awful thing to accept. Rebecca was on a trip with her best friend, staying with her friend's dad. They had a curfew. They were being supervised, and it still went so terribly wrong. The whole situation with the cab not showing up, that's a key factor right there. It forced them into this choice they shouldn't have had to make, and they felt like they had no other option but to accept a ride from strangers. So, what can you take from a story like this? Well, the biggest takeaway, the one that stands out the most, is to trust your gut. Both Rebecca and Jasmine were apprehensive about getting on that motorcycle. They knew it wasn't a good idea, but they let themselves get talked into it. And that feeling? That's your intuition trying to protect you. If something feels off, if it makes you even a little bit uncomfortable, it's a red flag. Don't worry about being rude. Don't worry about hurting someone's feelings. Your safety, your life is so much more important than that. So, beyond just that immediate gut feeling, there are some other things that are just basic, common sense practices that you should always follow. Be aware of your surroundings. This is a big one. Keep your head up when you're walking. Don't be so lost in your phone or in a conversation that you miss what's going on around you. Try to walk in well-lit, populated areas and avoid shortcuts through alleys or parks at night. Travel in groups whenever you can. Honestly, there's safety in numbers. Most attackers, they're looking for easy targets. Someone who's alone. If you're with a friend or a group of people, you're just less likely to be targeted. Always have a backup plan. This is what went wrong for Rebecca and Jasmine. The cab didn't show up. They didn't have a plan B. Today, with smartphones, it's different. But you should always have a plan for how you're going to get home safely, whether that's having a reliable rideshare app, a trusted friend you can call, or even having a little extra cash for a cab, just in case. Don't ever put yourself in a position where you feel like your only option is to do something unsafe. Communicate your plans. Tell someone where you're going, who you're with, and when you expect to be back. And if those plans change, even a little bit, let them know. That way, if something goes wrong, someone knows where to start looking. And finally, if you are ever in immediate danger, or if you see something suspicious, call emergency services right away. Rebecca's friends ran to find a payphone. And today, you can just call 911. Don't hesitate. This case, it's a perfect storm of failure. You have the attackers who were just violent and opportunistic, and then you have a law enforcement system that honestly just completely failed Rebecca. The terrible mistakes they made. Jumping to conclusions, offering a plea deal without waiting for the DNA evidence. It allowed a murderer to get away with a ridiculously light sentence and let another suspect walk free. It just shows how much of a difference competent police work makes. A whole community was left just seething with anger and disappointment, and a family was left with no justice. It's a really harsh lesson. But it's also a story about resilience. The Middleton family, Dana, Jasmine, they never stopped fighting for Rebecca. They forced the system to re-examine what it had done, and they kept her memory alive. Her legacy isn't just a story of a horrific crime. It's a story about the love of a community and the relentless pursuit of justice, even when the system seems broken. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you or someone you know might be a victim of human trafficking or any kind of violent crime, there is help available. The National Human Trafficking Hotline is a resource you can call. The number is 1-888-373-7888. You can call them 24/7 from anywhere in the U.S. They can connect you with people who can help you get to safety.